Ettienne. I called you the bearer of bad news. You've come with bad news, but not so bad. I mean, flat is not a deterioration.
Flat is not a deterioration, that is correct. And underneath the surface, there are actually some positive developments that one can talk about. For instance, we had another improvement in sentiment when we surveyed the new vehicle dealers. Retailers of consumer durable goods also a little bit more upbeat than, for example, a quarter or two ago. We saw similar kind of tendencies among wholesalers, also of consumer goods, and I think very encouraging. Another quarter of improvement amongst manufacturers that export, and I was clearly benefiting from what is very vibrant global conditions at this point. So, not all bad news. There are pockets and certain industries that are certainly doing better than, for example, 6-8 months ago.
I mean, in terms of the car guys, they've had a really tough couple of years, 2 or so. So do you expect this upside that we're seeing in confidence in that sector to continue? Well,
it's now 2 quarters in the making. In the second quarter of 2017, the index level was 11. Right? So 9 out of every 10 respondents in that particular sector were despondent, pretty downbeat. Right? Now the index level is at 32, so slowly we're moving in the right direction. And I think the underpin here is that we have, over the last couple of quarters, we've seen an improvement in new vehicle sales volumes. Right? Yes, there are big price discounts, but give the consumer a bargain and they will take it. And I think that's certainly a sector that's benefiting from that.
For sure. And the food producers, has the recovery in the maize crop and the easing drought conditions impacted the uptick in confidence there in any way?
We wouldn't know specifically the answer to that question. It's not an industry that we survey. But what we do pick up in our survey, and it comes back to a point that I made earlier, if you're a manufacturer of food, beverages, and you're exporting into Africa and to other countries in the world, you are distinctly more upbeat than, for example, a manufacturer that is manufacturing steel and is supplying to the construction industry, which is clearly in the doldrums. So there we have to differentiate between those that are making something for the local market and those that are exporting. Food and beverage manufacturers fit that bill.
I mean, Ettienne, let's talk about the guys who are not doing so well now, and perhaps give me insights into the reasons.
Yes, the construction industry is really battling, particularly on the non-residential side of things. So they are pretty downbeat. They have been downbeat for quite some time, and it seems as if in that particular sector, things are starting to get worse. So confidence for building contractors on the non-residential side of things, that index level sits at 11. I mean, this is shockingly low.
By non-residential, do you mean the guys that build roads and government buildings and...
Yes, specifically it would talk to those that do office blocks, for example, warehousing or whatever the case is. So non-residential. On the residential side of things, the developers and contractors are distinctly more upbeat. The index level, for example, would be in the high 40s compared to 11 for those contractors in the non-residential side. Another sector that is really battling is civil construction. Okay, and 80-90% of our respondents in that part of the business suggest that there is simply not enough business to go around. Right, and that, of course, is a reflection of, for example, government infrastructure spending, which is not shooting the lights out.
Which you suggest is showing signs of getting even worse.
Well, not necessarily worse, but we do know, for example, that when it comes to Eskom, when it comes to Transnet, when it comes to Sunroll, their CapEx budgets are shrinking. Now, can you imagine if you had them as your client? There's not a lot of business that goes around suddenly, and you would be downbeat because your activity will simply not be there. And we're certainly seeing that. And then another sector that's battling, if you're not a manufacturing exporter, earlier on we spoke about if you're a manufacturer and you make something but you're selling it in the local market, you are really facing a lot of headwinds. Domestic demand is pretty weak, we all know that, and you see it in domestic sales volumes, for example, being down quite a bit. And some of those manufacturers are also experiencing a bit of a profit squeeze. Some of our respondents are complaining about raw material costs are becoming more expensive. If that at the same time happens at the same time when domestic demand is weak, then your profitability is coming under pressure. And that's clearly been one factor that's weighing down on the mood of many manufacturers selling locally. And then just very generally speaking, it is also very clear from our survey results that respondents are still very concerned about the political situation in South Africa. Now, whether we agree or disagree with that, they're clearly telling us that this is a constraint on their business in one way or another. And I think that's quite important.
I mean, Ettienne, help us understand, these results, or the survey was done before the S&P downgrade. Do you think that your respondents factored in a downgrade when they responded to some of your questions, or are we expecting to see an even worse number in the next?
Excellent question. I think our view is that we don't necessarily going to see confidence now falling off a cliff post the event. I think it was a general feeling leading up to last week on Friday that South Africa, or that there was a good chance that South Africa is going to be downgraded in any event, and subsequently it happened. So I think many respondents actually expected an outcome like that. So I don't think necessarily that from these kind of 34 low levels that we're now going to see much lower levels in time. That being said, we've got a small hurdle to cross come December, the ANC's elective conference.
And then what are they saying? What would they like to see? I did see your report touched on sort of market-friendly policies, but what are they saying in their interactions with you?
Well, what is quite clear is that business confidence is low. It is also relatively widespread. And if you really want to get the economy to grow again, to get the economy on the right path, that needs to change. What will it take to change that? A very good starting point would be leadership that understands the urgency of the matter from a political perspective. I think that's quite important. Secondly, leadership that is absolutely determined to root out the corruption, and when it comes at public finance level, to do something about the wasteful spending and the fact that they're still in the system. Leadership that also understands the urgency and the importance of implementing the right kind of policies. Respondents will tell us business-friendly policies, no surprise there. But we will go a far way if we can just, for example, reduce the number of regulatory issues for many of our respondents. We will go a long way, just generally, if we have leadership to implement governance overall. Make governance structures strong at SOE levels. Earlier I talked about root out corruption. That's all sentiment, confidence boosting measures that can go a long way. And all we need is exactly that. I think many of our respondents are pretty able to invest and to employ, but not necessarily at this point willing. Change that part of the equation and you can set in motion a powerful circle of events that can actually catapult the economy to higher growth levels. But there's a lot of ifs there, there's a lot of buts, but this is what the feedback is, what we're getting.
And you've been an economist for a very long time. I mean, in your view, are we being too optimistic in thinking that with the appointment of just one man, the right kind of man, all the problems that we're experiencing, regulation, corruption, will be uprooted?
Well, I think we need to be realistic. I think December is more than just the individual, very importantly. And rating agencies perceive it in exactly the same fashion. Far more important, in our view, would be the policies that come with the individual. Okay? And, from what we've seen in public, the Deputy President has a clear, concise plan that, should he be elected as President of the ANC and the President of the country, this is what we can work towards. It's clear, precise, it is business friendly in many respects, and it is touching the right buttons. So if that is the message that's being reported from him and his team, and the respondents clearly believe that a lot of those things are the right solutions for the problems that we face, certainly they would feel a little bit more upbeat and feel a little bit more encouraged should the political change be in that particular fashion.
I mean, some might argue that the Deputy President's most fierce competitor also has a plan. Her plan on the table, radical economic transformation, the nationalization of banks. And that is a concrete plan and unity. So, I mean, your view.
So we can only evaluate the two candidates on what we've seen in public. We know that Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma is not in the public eye, not in the media spotlight, to the extent that she has made announcements on policy. It was more politically driven in a way, very vague. In contrast, the other plans that we have, from the Deputy President is sharp, concise, to the point. So once again, respondents, business people, corporates, weigh up these two things, and it's clear what the preference that they would have at this point.
Just a quick one, the Black Friday effect, what should we be expecting from retailers in the next reading?
We don't know, to be honest. I think the jury is still out. Early indications are, yes, long queues, people buying, volumes up, but obviously price discounts have been quite significant, and that is quite an important variable when you think about the gross profit margin of some of these retailers.
I actually didn't agree that the price discounts were significant, so I didn't buy anything. But
you're at the wrong shops then.
We'll leave it there. Thanks so much, Ettienne.
Sure.
That was RMB Chief Economist Ettienne le Roux.